Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our trying to load information here. Hold on just one second. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I hope people can hear me. If you can hear me, just type in on chat to let me know that you can hear the conversation. Yes, you can. Good. Not everybody has to, but good. You will notice there will be no camera tonight because I'm actually doing this webinar from home. So don't want to show you my house that much. I imagine y'all would prefer not to have to see me using video on you. So we're going to there'll be a lot that you'll get to see on desktop. I'm going to try to keep this to 45 minutes, but I will be happy to answer any questions. Again, this is our weekly live Q&A. This is, of course, our first Monday night one, and we will be doing these on Monday nights from here on out at 8 p.m. Try to get done hopefully around 9 p.m. at the latest. I've got a good group of people here. And, of course, these are optional sessions, but they are recorded and are available in a folder. The recorded sessions, including the one last week, is available in a recorded folder in the Blackboard. So you do have it available to download. You will also notice that there is now a folder for lectures, and the first lecture, which is about 40 minutes or so, which is lecture 1A, the first of the two lectures for week one, has been uploaded. So we are in good shape with that, trying to move forward in terms of getting those lectures, and there'll be more lectures up in the next 24 hours. I had an issue in that several of the lectures that I've been working on, actually, the recording system didn't record them properly. So I've actually had to go back and do them again. And it's not something I'm comfortable with. Normally I'm pretty good with it, and I hate it for y'all. But I will have lectures up that'll go over the readings, chapters 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the text, as well as one lecture in particular, lecture 2A, will focus on the economic indicators, primer, the information in that. I want to kind of go over the sources for it and provide some background because I use that information a lot. And so there will be a lecture of about 30 minutes on that. Again, these are available for you to listen at your leisure between now and the midterm exam, as well as to ask questions about in the discussion on the discussion board, as well as in these Q&A sessions. So, excuse me, what I would like to do is go ahead now and open the floor for any questions about anything other than assignment one, because I do have assignment one pulled up, and we will talk a little bit about assignment one. I imagine that's going to take up most of the time here, but I am prepared to, my main focus in terms of what I want to talk to you about is about assignment one, as well as the reading assignments, those links, those article links on MSAs, on metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas, and show you some reasons why we use them. And I'll do that a little bit also in the lecture, but I also want to just kind of cover that as well. But the main thing is to talk about the regional analysis, the regional scan report that, of course, is due next week. So if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat, or if I'm going to, I'm also right now, if anybody, I'm trying to remember about
entry and exit chimes are on. Entry and exit chimes are off.
What I want to also do is, if anybody would like to ask a question, if you want to text, and I can read the question, or if you want to text and enable to where I can turn on your microphone where you can ask the question verbally, we can do that as well. But at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Now, the one thing you can do if you want is you can unmute your line. I did move it over to Q&A mode, so you can unmute yourself at this point if you would like to ask a question. Okay. Can it be heading style or APA on assignment one? I am going to say that it should be heading style. That is probably what I would prefer, because I'll be very honest, when you're writing for what you guys are going to be writing, you're writing not for an audience that needs to be able to disseminate it quicker. What we will probably do once we start getting to the final report is start really focusing your writing more in the APA style. So for the start off with this assignment, heading style with bullet points is acceptable, as long as you provide source information at the end. Will be discussions where I summarize. Will be discussions where I summarize chapter readings count towards participation grades. Yes, they will. If using the discussion board does the activity that you show on the discussion boards does contribute to your participation grade. And of course, if you're not participating, the chances are your grades will be lower. So, it's kind of up to you. But the key thing is that, you do have your reading assignments, those articles that we talked about in the last one. If you haven't, if you read that assignment about the article readings, to make sure you do that, because that, of course, explains that there's these two articles that you should read, one that is a research paper and one that is more of a practitioner or an application style article that would be found in other forms of media, in refined professional media, but doesn't have to be in a research publication. And do some commentary on those articles, what you like, what you didn't like, what didn't make sense, what did make sense, what jives with what you've learned in this class and what doesn't. That is an important part of your discussion, part of your participation in discussion grade as well. So, and Elijah, I do appreciate what you've written so far in the discussion boards. Are there any other questions at this time? Okay. What I am going to do now, just to kind of give everybody a chance, is I am going to go to desktop and kind of go over this, the assignment one a little bit. And I am going to show you some examples, and I am going to post one of these example documents into the miscellaneous folder on course documents. I'm actually probably going to do that while y'all are online, so that you see me do it, so that I made sure that I've done it. So let me go over to desktop, and should be able, and where we're going to go is, we're actually going to, I pulled this up and shouldn't have. What we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the assignment. You may or may not see it clearly because of how small the text is on your screen. But I do want, this is a course about the regional or environmental scan. And the scan is not as much it is, you can do it as a bullet point scan. And it's not like there's like a checklist, but obviously the outline that is provided in the assignment should serve as kind of, what are you trying to capture? And obviously, depending on the county you're in, I've talked about, what resources are available to pull this information. Somebody mentioned the state of North Carolina, and there's a lot of information that the North Carolina Department of Commerce provides. If you were to look up Access NC, which I talked about last week, I believe, they have some information. But I do want to show you an example of one that of a style, and the reason I say style is that it's probably not fully inclusive, but the thing that is available, the product that you're kind of working towards, or that you're kind of working in, is something called a comprehensive economic development strategy. And a lot of times CEDS, SEDS, really serve a lot of the components of what you're working on in this class would be incorporated into the comprehensive economic development strategy. And there's a lot, and what this document contains when it's developed, and it's not developed every year in a lot of places. As you can see, this is a regional one that was developed back in 2012 for the Eastern Carolina Council, which was Eastern Carolina Council of Governments, which includes Carteret, Craven, Duplin, Greene, Jones, Lenoir, Onslow, Pamlico, and Wayne. So in other words, a lot of the counties that are between the Northeast area, where I am in here in Rocky Mount, as well as Pitt County, and going up towards Elizabeth City and up towards Tidewater area, and then of course it's also, but still it's above New Hanover, Brunswick, and the area, of course, around Wilmington and the beach area. So this area here, which does of course is along the Atlantic, but also does go inland some. That area has a council of governments, and they developed this document back in 2012. It was it looks like it was supported by the federal U.S. EDA, which ties into some of the study you've probably done about the role of the federal government and also the work that the federal government has or the national government has with state and local governments and economic development. So what you see here is in this table of contents, it lists a variety of topics, and one of them is background. And what I would say is what you're really looking at is that the regional scan or the environmental scan would be akin to what they've done here in the background of this document. And I chose this one because it's a relatively short document. These documents can get pretty thick and they can get pretty long, but this one provides some ways. There's an introduction here with it's pretty boilerplate-ish, and then you get into the background. And you'll see that with the background, there are headings, one about the geography of the area, and you can read through that. Then you have the economy. And again, it's written in narrative, but for our purposes, I am almost preferable that you write it in bullet form instead of in narrative, because I think a lot of times when I see people read through these documents, they prefer the bullet form. And again, you will have a chance when you go towards the final assignment to write that in narrative form, to actually write that in a written form as a document. As you can see, they don't do this APA. They don't include the references in the document. And the reason being is that usually when people read these documents, when they are presented either to elected officials or to professional senior staff or others, they're not as much concerned about going in there and checking all the works cited. There's generally a belief, and it's referred to sometimes in the introduction, or it's referred to in some point, or there's a whole bunch of back data and appendices that's included that can be used to really ensure that the data is there. That does not mean that you shouldn't list your sources. That is the thing that you have to provide. Is you have to provide an overview plus the works cited. That is encouraged with that. And I'm going to write an email tonight after this is done where I refer that, so that I make sure that all students are aware of that. You can see it does have some charts in here about population growth. Some of these are topics that you'll see are covered also in assignment 2 that we go to after assignment 1 is due. But you can see it includes some information about employment. You notice that there are some of the things that we ask for in so far, and you can kind of read through it for yourself, but this introduction covers education and covers some other topics, and you can kind of see how it does it, and you can kind of say, okay, not necessarily are we asking you to cover all these particular topics, and there's probably some that we're asking you to include that are not in here, but it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of information that we're looking for. So this is a very good example. It's probably the best example that I found in terms of the length and the depth of information that we're looking for. There was another example that was available, actually was done back in 2010 or so by Hickory, and then that same study was updated very recently for the Catawba region. The problem is it's pretty in-depth. It's pretty deep. And so I looked at the two. I looked at this and I looked at Catawba, and I said, this is probably the better one for what we're using it for. So this is, you can see there are some other examples of work that you're going to be doing later on that are included in here. So this is a nice reference document to have. So we are going to make it available through Blackboard for you to view and download and kind of use as an example for your own work as we move forward in this class. So that is kind of what I wanted to cover with respect to this assignment. Again, the assignment will be due by 11:59 p.m. next Wednesday, February the 1st, and I'll be happy to answer questions all the way up through that afternoon and evening. Just remember that, if you want to have more time, you need to plan accordingly. And my intentions are not necessarily to review drafts. The grading of this, like other assignments, is that I will evaluate the completeness. I will evaluate it on the basis of the work that's been done. And obviously it's about making sure that you've done the assignment, that you show that you've put the effort into it. And then if I feel like there are things that need to be in better shape as we move forward, I will make those suggestions. So it's more about cumulative body of work in terms of that this is part of a greater assignment that will be due at the end of the semester. So that is what I have with respect to assignment 1. Let me look quickly at the go back to the text, see if there were any other questions. At this point, there isn't any. So now I want to talk a little bit about the regional analysis work that you've been doing. There are several links that were provided in your work today, and I'm actually going to do something really quick. You're not going to see this, but I am going to pull up. I had gone in there and checked the links because I had seen where, because of the inauguration that happened over the weekend, that several sites, including whitehouse.gov, were changed. And part of that one of the sites we had listed was a whitehouse.gov site that no longer is available. So what we've done is that I actually posted online on the discussion. I posted on one of the discussion threads the revised links for those assignments that were part of week 2. So you will have a chance to look at that. But, metropolitan areas are important. Metropolitan and micropolitan areas are how we as a nation do a lot of regional work. There are other regional structures as well. You have councils of governments. You have state-defined regions. The example probably North Carolina uses a regional approach to economic development. Technically, those regions have changed recently. Those regions had stayed relatively the same for a significant period of time. And then in the last 4 years under the McCrory administration, those regions were changed. And it was rather interesting how they were changed. But that they are done in a way to try to align. Regions are done to try to align common interests and to align populations together so that you hope you have a better presence with respect to economic development. And the work that I'll show in the lecture, which will be available on Wednesday for this week, we'll talk a little bit more about that, about what really regions consist and why we do it. The text that you have that was actually originally presented, the Introduction to Regional Economics, which is actually a very thick book if you print it out. I actually printed out the whole thing. We don't expect you to read the whole thing, but there's a lot of good information in there. And in the course of the lecture, I will bring up some of that information in my work. So there's definitely going to be some references made to some of the work in that regional economics book. This is the one that was published and available online through West Virginia University. So that is something to be aware of. Because it's not just going to be the introduction that's in chapter 1. It's also going to be some of the other chapters. It's a pretty easy book to look up online. But let's take a look at some of the other information with respect to economic development. I'm sorry, to regions. With respect to regions, like I said, these are the links, and you can see that there are 4 of them for this week. Excuse me. If you give me just a second. Fun part of. And you can see that these are the 4 that are assigned for this week. If you look at your screen, you have something available from the Census Bureau about metropolitan areas. And again, all of these kind of provide some background about how metropolitan areas are determined, why we have them, as well as a list of all of them. When it comes to North Carolina, and I actually just posted this on one of the discussion boards, a great resource for figuring out how statistic areas are established is Wikipedia. Now, I am not saying that you should be using Wikipedia for research. You all are graduate students. We don't like undergraduate students doing it, and graduate students certainly should not be using it as source material because it is not, it's not been peer reviewed. It's not verified. It's pretty, and there's some spotty aspects of it. But when it comes to tabular data or just simple, hey, I need a quick reference on something so I can do some work, it's a great resource. And one of the things it does is that they do, and I think it's actually probably done by the feds actually, they do go in and they actually do update information about statistical areas by each state. and I've pulled up and I actually provided the link in the discussion page, and it talks about statistical areas. And really there's kind of a hierarchy of statistical areas. The first one being that you have combined statistical areas. And these are all of this is kind of developed by the combined statistical area is actually a concept that is utilized by the Office of Management and Budget. It's not an official Census Bureau review, but it's done by Office of Management and Budget, and it is done for their own purposes. And what combined statistical areas are done is that where they kind of see that there are multiple statistical areas that have interactions amongst each other, whether they be metropolitan or micropolitan, they kind of merge them together. And you can see that there's an example below. The first one, if you went to this page, was the Charlotte Concord NCSC CSA. And what this is it's a combination of the Charlotte Concord Gastonia MSA, which also includes York County, Lancaster County, and Chester County, South Carolina, along with the Shelby micropolitan area, which is Cleveland County, and the Stanley County or Albemarle micropolitan area. So all of that area has been combined for a combined statistical area. Then you have, of course, the two different types of core-based statistical areas, which MSAs have a certain definition that you can look up, and micropolitan areas have their own definition that you can look up. And you can find that information in your reading. And you can see that there are you've got the metropolitan area of Charlotte, Concord, Gastonia, which has several counties in it. And the Census Bureau works in determining, and the Census Bureau and the Office of Management and Budget kind of work together in determining what those areas are. The thing is, we've also noticed that the feds have started developing greater use of combined statistical areas. And I'll show you one example down at the bottom, which obviously I care a little more about, and that's in Rocky Mount. This past, very recently, the feds started looking at Rocky Mount's metropolitan area, which includes Nash and Edgecombe counties, along with Wilson's micropolitan area, which is Wilson only, and Roanoke Rapids, which is Halifax and Northampton, as a combined statistical area. That's 5 counties with a combined population of 300,000 residents, over 300,000 residents. Half of those are tied to Rocky Mount and to the Rocky Mount metropolitan area, and the other half are in Wilson, Roanoke Rapids. And I would argue that it makes sense because there's a lot of interaction in terms of commuting patterns. A lot of people who live in Wilson travel to Rocky Mount to work, or people in Roanoke Rapids travel to Rocky Mount for work, or Rocky Mount residents travel both to Roanoke Rapids and Wilson for work. There's a lot of interaction between those three areas in terms of economic activity and community activity. That is a broader local market, a broader regional market. And so that area has been tied. And now, for example, the state of North Carolina tracks employment does employment reporting on the basis of this area. So they actually look at what they actually track the unemployment rate and the employment activity for this 5-county area, as well as separately for each of the metropolitan and micropolitan areas, and then of course for each of the counties. So what these designations do, these micropolitan and metropolitan designations, is that they do serve to further identify significant regions of activity in terms of population and kind of tie them together for the purpose of analysis, evaluation, and in some cases, just establishing how you award certain grants and other government programs based on select criteria. They're also used a lot in the private sector by private researchers to kind of compare and contrast economic performance. And it leads to a lot of journalism articles. You can kind of look here and you can see, you've got one of the more common ones is that a lot of people see, just checking this to make sure. One of the more common ones is the 10 best metropolitan areas for finding a job. There's a lot of best and worst lists out there. And a lot of this is done by magazines that are trying to, it's what if you've heard of clickbait, that's what it is in a lot of cases. But some of it is interesting. But obviously, when a metropolitan area sees itself in that top 10 list a lot, it's going to tout it. Their local economic development people are going to tout it because it's an external article, and while the research model they may be using may not necessarily mean anything, there may not necessarily be any validity. The fact of the matter is, it's kind of like winning it's like winning any kind of award. You're always happy to get an award. It's not a participation prize because it's based on rank, and people do see it. Wallet Hub, which is a finance services website. It's this one here that's done the 2017 best and worst metro areas for STEM professionals. These types of websites do a lot of these articles. Again, they don't necessarily mean anything. They are more a reflection of just data, but you have to look at how the data is put together. But these type of ranking publications, which come out a lot, let me go ahead and let me go back to 10 best metro areas finding a job from Forbes. These areas can really impact the mindset of a community. They can if a group gets a high ranking, obviously it's a feather in your cap. If you get a low ranking, you're on a 10 worst list, it can cause some problems. And I think back even to Rocky Mount, we were put on a list by Forbes of economically distressed metropolitan areas, one of the 10 worst. This was back, I think, around 2008, 2009. And that created, when the local civic leaders saw us on that list, it led to them to say, well, what are we going to do about it? And it led to some study, and it's led to some initiatives, and it's led to some efforts. I wouldn't say that any of them are any easier. It doesn't make the work any easier, but it can be used. That kind of analysis, particularly if you're comparing yourself to desirable areas or areas that you know are growing, or how are you doing comparing to others, can be, okay, we got to figure out what the problems are, which then leads to development of economic strategies, which requires observation, such as the regional scan that you're going to be working on this coming week. But you can see, like, they've come up with this. They go and they do a bunch of data analysis to figure out where are the best places to find a job. And they have a formula that you can typically find that they'll tell you based on whatever data is. A lot of it's labor data. In terms of livability, they kind of tie in crime data and other types. They run into some problems because not all data is available at the same aggregate level. For example, when you're dealing with crime data is not necessarily available at a metropolitan level. It's available at a jurisdictional level for those jurisdictions that report to the FBI. And the FBI is not terribly thrilled with the idea of people using their reporting for crime statistics because, in general, crime statistics are they discourage using crime statistics to compare locations within a given year, because they will talk about how that there are a lot of extenuating factors that can affect crime rates. For example, Myrtle Beach has a high crime rate. So does Daytona Beach. Reason why is there's a lot of tourist activity that goes on there, and it's a beach town. It's more of a natural tendency for those areas to have a lot of criminal activity, mostly from people coming in. But that does not mean that the areas are unsafe. It just means they get a lot of activity. So that's an example. They really discourage saying, okay, where was everybody in 2005, and comparing one city's murder rate or one city's violent crime rate to another. People still do it. Sometimes there are outliers that have to be taken into consideration, like what's happened to Chicago in recent years. But the fact is that those type of measures, while they are part of the broader availability of data for socioeconomic analysis, are challenging because they are not necessarily reflective of a given metropolitan area. In some cases, you may only have the data for a given city or a given county's law enforcement office. You may not have all the data available with that type of data. And there's other types of data regarding housing, education, and others. If the Census Bureau has not developed estimates through their American Community Survey or some of their other products to be able to aggregate that data at the prescribed levels, like a micropolitan analysis or a metropolitan analysis, or those, if that data is not available for the range that you're looking at and already been predetermined, you're going to run into some problems trying to piece the data together from different sources and of course, from jurisdictions. It can also be used for a lot of private analysis for economic development. This is more of kind of that type of analysis that uses metropolitan areas. This is the Milken Institute. that is based on the West Coast, and they do a best performing cities analysis, which means best performing metropolitan areas analysis. And they actually look at large metros and small metros separately, which is a good thing. And while overall they are interested in overall job growth, this is Milken Institute does a lot of work looking at industrial economic development. They also look at the high-tech industries. They actually kind of separate out the high-tech industries. And, they have their identities, but they do analyze all metropolitan areas, all areas that are defined as metropolitan areas. For a lot of groups, when they do metropolitan level analysis, they will take out, say, the 100 largest metropolitan areas or metropolitan areas over a certain population, say 500,000, 1 million, whatever the case may be, and they will separate them out and say those are large metros. Then they will take the rest of the metropolitan areas together and they will consider them small metros. In this one, they do have a 2006. They've done their 2016. It actually came out late last year. So I want to go to small cities because for the most part, you all chose smaller cities, and you can see this is a rank analysis. They've done this for many years, so you can see where they were in 2016 to 2015. We're just going to look at North Carolina, so I'm going to search in NC. That comes up, and you can see that there are 6 metropolitan areas in North Carolina that are listed, and you can see they're all ranked. This is out of a total of I believe that there were, if I remember, I'm trying to remember correctly how many there were in this grouping. There were 201. So these are rankings out of a group of 201. And you can see nobody really of that, most of them are in the bottom half. Not necessarily a bad thing, because you can kind of look at it from the standpoint of this is ranking, not necessarily growth. You can kind of see when you look at their growth, 1-year growth, their growth numbers are very similar, but they're kind of behind trends. So when they do these analysis, you may have seen growth. And like, for example, I can tell you all of these areas saw growth between 2014 and 2015. I can tell you that was the case for many of them, or they were able to stay steady. But the thing was that a lot of other areas that they're compared to did not. You can also see with respect to salaries, you keep looking at these numbers. One thing I will point out, this, as I talked about, this analysis actually does look at high tech activity. One of the things it looks at is high tech GDP and some other studies. And if you'll notice, Rocky Mount does not get great ratings, but for some reason we continue to be among the top small metros in the high tech sector. And a large part of this is because we have a large manufacturer, which was originally Abbott Laboratories and then became Hospira and has now been sold and is part of Pfizer. It's a large manufacturing operation on the north of Rocky Mount, and they produce saline injectables, a medical product. It is considered a high-tech product. We also have a couple of other smaller industries that do some high-tech work. It's not what you would normally think of with high-tech because it doesn't involve computers and doesn't involve like making apps and such, but it is considered high-tech manufacturing by this group. Some people might not consider it high-tech manufacturing, but it is. I mean, there's a lot of quality control involved in it. There's a lot of specialized equipment. They just spent they're in the process of spending over $150 million on investments in that facility, which includes improving testing, improving operations, and adding new equipment. So it's not cheap. Somebody asked, let me go. I will answer that in just a second. But this is just one example of one of the kind of tools that are developed by various groups to analyze economic activity. This is another one that came out 2 years ago more, and I think it's been discontinued. And this was something that was done where they looked at tax data. They actually looked at tax deduction data from tax returns to look at charitable giving at a local level. This was done county, but it was also done by metro area. You can see if you were to look here in the search field, you would see zip code, county, metro area, state. And this was kind of a very controversial one. It was developed by the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which is kind of the newsletter, the journalistic institution of the nonprofit sector. And they did this actually twice. They did it in 2012 and they did it again in 2014. And they did it based off of information from the IRS. they found in large part that a lot of smaller communities, if you look here, the darker the color, the more charitable in terms of the giving ratio of giving to income. And you can see actually that a lot of times these rural, this kind of band along I-95 that you would think of as a pretty, as an area that economically speaking is probably either below median or below the average of the state as a whole, or in some areas is military communities like Wayne County and Lenoir County and Cumberland County, Fayetteville, that this area actually did better as a percentage of overall than areas like the Raleigh metropolitan area or Orange County up here in Chapel Hill, that those areas actually did less. And there was some concern about the methodology, so they actually discontinued this study, which I can understand, because the information, because people would say, well, the more money you make, or in some cases they would say you're only counting it by certain means, you had limited information available. Of course, what happens when these types of rankings and such come out is jurisdictions like to toot their own horns, and this is like one example here. You've got Triangle Business Journal. Almost, it feels like like once a month, it feels like there is at least a new. There's a new ranking coming out saying, hey, Raleigh's doing well in this, Durham's doing well at this, or Raleigh and Durham are beating Charlotte in something, or they're getting beat by Charlotte in something. For example, they actually have a link that you can go to of list and awards, and it will say, let me see if click here. It will actually, now they actually do their own listings like internally, but they do a lot of articles where, like this one's one of the more recent ones that came out about the real estate market and talked about how both metropolitan areas, this was done by realtors. So it was actually, it's good industry level research because it's done by the industry itself, that they both saw higher than average increases in home prices and home sales in 2017. That's a good thing and a bad thing. If you're trying to sell your house, it's a wonderful thing. If you're trying to buy a house, it may not be such a wonderful thing. But But for the standpoint of the region, unless they start thinking that, we're becoming hyperactive and we're getting to where we're unaffordable and we're going to stop seeing growth, overall it's a good thing because it's an indication of appreciation, which is growing incomes, growing wealth, growing desires. At the government level, growing revenues. Of course, it also means growing service demands, but that's typically a sign of a positive. And that's one of the things that we take a look at. So let me go back to the main screen again, and I'm going to stop the share and kind of see if there are other questions that have been asked. Why is the Raleigh metro area not on the list? Well, that's because it's a large metro. I go back to that example from Milken. Pull that up. We're going to go to large cities and view 2016 rankings for large cities. Again, they kind of separated out. I'm going to type in NC again, and you're going to see Raleigh is there, and it is up at the top. It is number 6 nationwide, same ranking as it had last year, top ranking of any of these metropolitan areas. And you can kind of see, some like for example, Fayetteville and Wilmington, both in the eastern part of the state, were also in this group because of their population size. And then technically the Tidewater, what I call Tidewater, but the Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Newport News metropolitan area includes a very small segment of northeastern North Carolina. Of course, you can get from the Outer Banks to that area directly, but also that there was a little bit of an area of North Carolina that's included in that Virginia area. But we don't, for the purposes of evaluating North Carolina, we don't consider that part of it. The same is true with this area, the Myrtle Beach area. There's like a little bit kind of as you're getting towards Southport that they kind of, I believe, gets included. So that's not included for our analysis, because in neither case is the core in North Carolina. In the case of Charlotte, the core is in North Carolina, even though we also include Rock Hill. So that's just something to think about there. Those were the main things that I wanted to share with you tonight. Let me go back and see if there are any other questions from the audience. Like I said, I'm going to take a few minutes after this. Actually, let me just go ahead and do it while I'm talking. I'm going to go ahead and load in the miscellaneous folder. And once I get it done, I'll actually show you. So you'll see it in readings and miscellaneous. You will see a file in there for the ECC CEDS report 2012 is what's going to be called. And you'll have a chance to see that, and you can use it for this course kind of as an example as you're working on assignment 1 and on other assignments as you move forward. So I'm going to upload that right now. It shouldn't take that long. It's not. And then I'm going to share. Then I'm going to go back and share this on the desktop. And what you will see if you go to Blackboard is you will see that in readings and miscellaneous, as I talked about, you can see that it is there. This is the report, and you'll be able to click on it and download it as well. Overall, I've been pleased with how people have responded to the discussion boards, as well as, following the announcements. When I post announcements in the future, they will be sent out by email. I'll make sure that is done. There will be an announcement tonight about kind of as a follow-up on assignment 1. The other thing that I did do also is the course schedule has been revised, and the main thing I did with that to explain is I had kind of made how we did each week confusing. So each week now is just like a regular week. It starts on Monday with Q&A, and then on Tuesday, Wednesday, I will post the lecture. And so it'll go in that course. And so this will, the lectures, really the importance of the lectures is that you're following them along. And if, of course, you can ask questions, use discussion board, ask questions, use the Q&A opportunity. We can go back even further. If we need to go back a couple of weeks, we can do that during this time. And I actually might do that. I might actually say during this Q&A time that we do that, or in the case of using the discussion board so that everybody has a chance to see it, you can use that. But, the key thing is that the lectures through coming through, let me pull this back. I'm pulling the assignment up. If you want to know how far we get along, all the lectures up to week 6, or what will be called lecture 6, will be lectures that may be covered on the midterm exam. When we talk about just the basics of economic base analysis. So this point here, week 6, economic base analysis, where we do the Q&A on the 20th of February and the 22nd on February is the lecture. These chapters that are listed here, which later in February you'll need to read chapters 10 and 9. You have to read those first, unfortunately, and then we will read chapters 3 and 6. This information, as well as these articles here, will possibly be information that will be included on the midterm. And that midterm, what will happen is that midterm will be released on probably on February 28th. The midterm will probably be posted on February 28th, and then you will have until March 3rd. So you'll have 4 days to complete the midterm. That is the plan that I'm looking at right now. And then I will post a lecture on March 1st about the basics of the input-output model. But the idea being is that you can list it at any time. There will not be anything posted during spring break week, and then you'll have week 8 the next week when we get back for a Q&A on the 13th and another lecture on the 15th. So that'll give you some time to be able to kind of absorb that information. And again, when you see these lectures are intended to be 35 to 45 minutes at most, and in some cases will be shorter. I'm going to try to do my best to keep them as short as possible. There's not a lot of, you won't see a lot of stuff on the screen. It is going to be a PowerPoint style narrative. So you'll see some headers and some topics, and you'll be able to listen to them. It'll be up to you to kind of follow along with some notation so that you can kind of learn some of the topics that we're covering. Again, if you want to see that those lectures, and as you can see, if you clicked on lectures and Blackboard, you would find, and again, this is something I don't like about Blackboard. I don't have Java doesn't work too well on my computer, and so you need to download it. If you can download, if you click on the file, it's a WNV. That's a Windows document. It should work. Someone's saying that they're saying it's not. If it doesn't, if I have problems, let me just ask people. Someone's saying making it available online. Yes, we can make the lecture PowerPoints available. There's not much to them, but we can do it. That's not a problem. I'm happy to do that in terms of making the lecture PowerPoints available for review as well. We can definitely do that. If people are having problems, one thing I might do is just create a private YouTube channel. I need to figure out I need to kind of make sure that I'm good with that, and then I can make that available as well. The people, the staff guys at East Carolina want as much of this behind the wall as possible, because for some reason they think people are really going to want to see this stuff if they're not taking this class. And then they won't be able to charge you for it. My feeling is you guys are taking this class because you're interested in it. You understand why you're paying for it. And the reality is you're getting a grade, and this is being used as course credit for a degree. So I don't see any problem with making this available on YouTube if you think that would be better. It might be better in terms of being able to watch it on a phone or an iPad. So once I can get this backlog with the lectures done, I may make that available. And also definitely the PowerPoints we can make available as well. All right, let me go back to the screen. Are there any other questions? Okay, I want to keep this up for just a minute or two. I'm done with everything I needed to say tonight. I want to thank everybody for, okay, some people are, so it may be sooner than later that we move to YouTube, in which case we would post the links there. But thank you guys very much for your attention, and for those of you who tuned in tonight. Got about 75% participation, 65-75% participation, which is good. And thanks to everyone. Appreciate it. And I will we'll do this again next week. Obviously, participate in the discussion boards, keep up with your reading and some other things, and look out for the lectures as they are posted online over the next 24, 48 hours. But thank you all very much, and I'll talk to you all next week. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat as we finish up. And Cordell, what I'll tell you is that we are still, and I'll say it'll still be available. They will still be available for download.